Welcome to the Becoming Years. Allow me to welcome the woman behind the voice and journey. Your host, Alina Wilson, is a mother, entrepreneur, aesthetics, wellness clinic owner, and author of Thoughtful Aging, restoring honor to the aging process with intention and grace. Her becoming years have been shaped by courage, reinvention, and wisdom. And the truth is, she is still becoming. Because the becoming years are not about who you were, they're about who you choose to become. No matter your age or your story, we are all still becoming. Alina, the mic is yours.
Welcome to the Becoming Years. This is Alina, your host, and today we're talking about something that I think is really important. It's a conversation that we really haven't had as women very often, maybe one-on-one with friends or with your partner or your spouse, but it tends to surface really in inconvenient moments, like when you're standing in the shower, staring into space, or halfway through a conversation thinking, wait, am I even in this moment right now? And the question is something like, why do I feel a little disconnected? Or why am I not feeling at all? Or is this as much as I'm supposed to feel? And I have to admit, entering this conversation with you today makes me just a little bit apprehensive because my mother called me earlier today. And for those of you who don't know, she's well along the pathway to memory loss. And she, I think, was explaining to me that my dad has somehow stumbled upon my podcast and is either listening to it or reading the transcript. I'm not sure. So I'm feeling just a little bit awkward about this one because today we're talking about the difference between sexuality and sensuality. And I think it's a really important conversation to have. So let's go. We're going to have it. We're going to do it without making it weird, or at least not too weird. And before you mentally brace yourself, this is not a light a candle and stare into your own soul for 3 hours kind of a conversation. It's actually about clarity, because this intersection of sensuality and sexuality impacts how we relate to each other, how we relate to ourselves. And if we don't stop and gain a deeper understanding of this, we are going to continue to feel that bit of a disconnect, and it shows up in the most inconvenient times. So let's dive in, see how far we can get, and I'll do my best to keep it clear and concise. Okay. When sensuality and sexuality are blurred together, which they often are, we don't have that language for what we're experiencing. We just have more of a vague sense of something's off, but I can't quite explain why. So let's separate them in a way that actually makes sense. Sensuality is your relationship to sensation. So sight, touch, taste, feel, smell. It's how you experience your body and the world through your senses. It's the feeling of like hot water on your skin when you finally get into the shower after a long day, or the taste, that first taste of coffee in the morning is so good. Instead of just gulping it down, you're really stopping to pay attention to how it tastes and what it feels like going into your body. It's noticing your favorite pair of sweatpants that somehow feel like emotional support. All of that, friends, is sensuality. There's no performance involved, no outcome, no end goal, no audience. It's just you and your senses, you and your sensuality. Sexuality, on the other hand, is your relationship to your sexual energy. It's your desire, your attraction, your intimacy, how you express all of that. It's a completely different category than sensuality. It's still very important, but it's not the same thing. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and also where things start to go a little sideways for a lot of us. Many women didn't grow up with these two things clearly defined, and I know I was one of those women. We'll get into that a little bit later. It's a little bit complicated. But sensuality and sexuality got blended together, or avoided altogether, or maybe introduced in very specific but very confusing ways, either through maybe an inappropriate experience you had, or trauma, or some kind of a religious overlay to what you were taught about your body. If you grew up around purity culture like I did, or honestly, even just a subtle messaging about what appropriate was and what it wasn't, and how you dressed and what you could wear, you probably got the memo early on that your body was something to be managed. You had to handle it carefully, not draw too much attention. You had to dress the right way so men wouldn't look at you the wrong way. Yes, that was a thing. And you definitely were not allowed to feel too much of anything. I have always found that fascinating because no one explains how you're supposed to turn that off like a light switch, but you were expected to turn it off. And purity culture, I'll just explain a little bit of that. It peaked in the 90s, but it really started in like the 70s, the 80s. And it was this idea that women were supposed to save themselves for marriage, which, it's a good thing. But you set yourself up for failure because the language of the day was, as a woman, we were expected to be these meek little lambs during the day and then these tigers at bed at nighttime. The minute we got married, we were supposed to somehow be able to flip that switch back on without having any context of how to do that, which left many of us feeling a lot of shame and a lot of guilt for doing something wrong. So let's just set that aside for a moment. We'll come back to that. Okay. At some point along the way, the messaging shifted to, now you're supposed to fully be able to access this part of yourself. And your nervous system was like, wait a minute, we've been rehearsing caution for like 15 years. And what exactly are we supposed to do now? Let's pause for a minute and talk about neuroscience because it actually helps us understand what's happening. Your brain is constantly forming associations. So if your early experiences linked body awareness and curiosity and sensation, even with the tiniest amount of shame or discomfort, your brain logs that as proceed with caution. I think it's probably a good time here to mention that it takes 3 seconds for your brain to internalize shame, and it takes 60 seconds for your brain to internalize joy or happiness. And what that means is that if you're feeling good and you're having a good experience, you have to really sit in that and acknowledge that and appreciate that for 60 seconds before you internalize that. Shame, on the other hand, 3 seconds. It happens almost without us even having control over it. And so when the brain senses caution, it doesn't lean into the experience. It manages it, which is how you end up in situations where you're technically present, but also narrating the experience in your head. You're aware of what's happening, but you're not fully inside of the experience. You're thinking things like, is this normal? Am I doing this right? Should I be responding differently? You're going into a performance mode. This is called top-down processing. It's where your thinking brain overrides the sensory experience. It's a very efficient way to get through life and a very ineffective way to actually feel it. So, what often happens is this: the sensuality, your ability to just experience sensation, gets muted or gets bypassed altogether because you're living your life suddenly from the neck up. Yes, you're taking care of your kids and your family and your job, and you're buying the groceries and you're making the dinners and you're doing all the things, but you're not living in your life. Sexuality, as it relates to that, becomes something that you access without that foundation, which makes it feel performative. It's inconsistent or not just as meaningful as you expect it to be. Here's the part that I think matters the most. Most women don't realize this is even happening. They just think, oh, maybe I'm distracted, or maybe I'm tired, or maybe this is just how it is, or even worse, there's something wrong with me. I am broken. But when sensuality starts to come back line, and remember, it's your feeling, it's your being in your body, it's experiencing your senses. When sensuality starts to come back online, not dramatically, not overtly, not overnight even, just gradually, something begins to shift. I worked with a woman who described this in a way that was very relatable to me. She said, I realized I don't actually taste my food, I just eat it, which, first of all, been there, done that. So she started paying attention, not in a transform your life in 7 days kind of a way, but just noticing what she was doing, what she was eating, what she was sensing. And then it slowly expanded. She noticed how tense her shoulders always were. She noticed how quickly she moved through everything without really being present, and how rarely she paused long enough to actually register anything. What's happening in those moments is her brain is re-engaging in something called interoception. It's actually your ability to sense internal states in the body. And this system is directly tied to your emotional awareness, your nervous system regulation, and even your capacity for pleasure and connection. So as that awareness increased, something else happened. She didn't just feel more, she felt more like herself. Did you catch that? If you're feeling a sense of vacancy, or you're feeling not quite like yourself, or you're wondering where you are, or where you've been, or the kids are grown, or the career's ending, and you just find yourself in this space of who am I, and where do I go next? This is your open invitation to return to your sensuality, to begin feeling again as you navigate that path forward. The outcome that doesn't get talked about very much is reigniting sensuality isn't about becoming more sexual. It's about becoming more available to your own life. And women who walk this path, they're often spending less time in their heads. They respond instead of overanalyzing. They're in the present moment. And more importantly, they recognize what feels good and what doesn't much faster, which, by the way, is incredibly useful information when you're trying to make changes. And when that feeling and that being in your body begins to intersect with sexuality, everything slows down, and it slows down in a good way. There's less pressure to perform, or sometimes even no pressure to perform, because you're just being, you're in your body. You're doing what feels good to you in that moment. There's less focus on an outcome and more capacity to actually experience what's happening. One woman said to me, it felt like switching from watching something in standard definition to suddenly realizing that there's an HD version she was missing out on the whole time. It's the same moment, but a very different experience. Another woman said to me, I didn't realize how much I was managing everything until I didn't have to. And this is where the shift happens, from doing to experiencing, from thinking to noticing, from performing to participating. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, I see parts of myself in this, I don't want you to walk away with a to-do list. There are no assignments here, no pressure here, just a different kind of awareness. Maybe noticing where you move quickly through things, where your body is present, but your attention isn't, where experience feels maybe a little bit flat. Just notice those things, not to fix them, but just to see it, because your body didn't forget how to feel. Did you catch that? It's really important to hear me on this. Your body didn't forget how to feel. You are not broken. Your body adapted. It did what it needed to do to keep you safe based on your environment. And when it starts to feel safe again, even in these small, ordinary moments, that capacity comes back. And when it does, it doesn't just change how you experience sensuality, it changes how you experience your life and your sexuality too. But not because you forced it, because you finally had access to the part of you that was meant to feel it in the first place. And that version of you, she's not new. She's just been waiting for you to notice she was there. Now, for those of you who, like me, had a lot of shame in your childhood or in growing up or in the culture in which you were raised, I want you to understand something. That is not your burden to carry. That is not a narrative you wrote. That was a story that was written for you. and this is really, really important, you can set that down. That does not belong to you. There is a better life waiting for you, and you have everything you need inside of you to access that right now, starting today. And trust me on this, you can do it, and it is worth it, and you are worth it. And so with that, I would invite you to reach out to a friend, reach out to somebody that you trust. Let them know that you're going to walk this journey, that you might need help slowing down and remembering to feel. And let those people be your support system, or that one person be your support system, so that you can experience the life that was meant for you, that you are meant to live. Because the brighter your light shines, the better your life will be. And with that, I'll see you all next time.